gaze into the faces of the lords of the 3rd century BC. Seleucus Nicator, Antigonus the One-Eyed, Pyrrhus of the Pyrrhus. These scarred wolves, born in the crucible of battle, measured their legitimacy by the count of fallen enemies and the leagues they had marched. They held power by the sword. But the throne of Egypt, the wealthiest power of the oikoumene, was occupied by a man who harbored a revulsion for the sight of blood. Ptolemy II Philadelphus embodied the complete opposite of his era. A sickly intellectual surrounded by luxury, he sought the company of zoologists and poets rather than boisterous generals. Enemies in military camps merely smirked with contempt, deeming him weak. However, this weak king paradoxically subdued his warlike neighbors without unsheathing a blade. While the gods of war burned empires to ash in their campaigns, Ptolemy bought greatness. Through his efforts, a city rose that eclipsed the sun, and the library emerged, the brain of the ancient world. The king proved a frightening truth. He had discovered a new formula for power. In previous episodes, we observed how Ptolemy I Soter, the old bodyguard of Alexander, stole his leader's body and turned Egypt into a fortress. His son inherited not just a crown, but a fine-tuned state mechanism. But along with the throne came a curse, the gigantic shadow of a hero father. The young ruler sought a solution to an impossible task. How does one hold power in a world of predators without being a warrior? How does one force the Macedonian phalanx to bow before a scholar? He needed to prove that intellect is capable of crushing phalanxes more effectively than any weapon. Today, we will step beyond the mere listing of dates. Our goal is the psychology of a man who compensated for physical frailty by creating the most powerful intellectual and economic shield of antiquity. Before you will unfold the story of how incest was transformed into a brilliant political technology. We will investigate the structure of history's first research institute and the reasons behind the state monopoly on papyrus. We will follow elephant hunters into the forests of Ethiopia and understand why the Alexandrian golden cage became the center of gravity for the entire oikoumene. This is the chronicle of the triumph of reason over brute force. We begin. 282 BC. Alexandria has plunged into mourning. The last of the great Diadochi, a companion of Alexander who wrestled Egypt away from the rest of the world, has departed from life. The throne is taken by his son, the 26-year-old Ptolemy II. The Macedonian elite, hardened veterans of India and Ipsus, gaze upon the new monarch with unconcealed skepticism. In their eyes, he is not a warrior, but a pampered youth raised within palace walls. His mentors were the philologist Philetus of Kos and the physicist Strato, not grim strategists. He knew not of sleeping on damp earth, nor of washing blood from a blade. To the old guard, he is a bookworm, an annoying mistake of nature. The psychological pressure on the young ruler is colossal. The king understands that his half-brother, Ptolemy Serranus, nicknamed the Thunderbolt, is prowling in the north, ready to take the crown by force. Ptolemy II needs to win the respect of his subjects immediately. Lacking the ability to impress them with muscles of steel, he decides to overwhelm them with a grandiose concept. He requires a symbol visible from farther away than any arrow can fly. Ptolemy II makes a choice that seems insane from a military perspective. Instead of forming new legions, he directs 800 talents of silver, the budget of an entire military campaign, toward the completion of works on the island of Pharos. The genius architect Sostratus of Cnidus receives the order to erect not merely a navigational tower, but a man-made mountain. A mass of white limestone soars upward more than 100 meters. This is the second tallest structure on the planet, after the pyramids of Giza, but unlike those ancient tombs, this colossus serves the living. The summit of the tower is crowned by complex mirrors of polished bronze. By day, they reflect the sun, and by night, they concentrate the flame of a fire so that the light pierces the darkness for 50 kilometers. Legend holds that Sostratus carved his own name into the stone, hiding it under plaster bearing the king's name, calculating for eternity. But for Ptolemy II, this mattered not. At the moment of opening, when the first beam sliced through the gloom of the Mediterranean, he stood at the foot not as a soldier, but as a master of the elements. The Lighthouse of Alexandria was not an ordinary landmark. It was a psychological weapon. The project demonstrated technological superiority. While competitors measured the length of their spears, Ptolemy II declared, "My engineers build the impossible." This inspired awe before the power of intellect. Furthermore, the tower functioned as an economic magnet. Safe round-the-clock entry into the harbor gifted Alexandria a monopoly on maritime trade. Ptolemy II realized war depletes the treasury, while commerce fills it. He bought the army's loyalty not with plunder, but with stable wages. The light of the lighthouse became the golden key to dominion over the sea. The triumph made Alexandria the brightest city of the Oikoumene, yet this very light cast thick shadows within the palace. His lawful wife, Arsinoe I, seemed a reliable support. However, a ship carrying a refugee was already docking at the shore. His own sister, Arsinoe II, had lost everything: her husband, her children, and her throne. She returned home not for consolation, but for power. 279 BC. A vessel without identifying markings enters the Alexandrian harbor. A woman in mourning robes steps down from the deck. Arsinoe II, the king's own sister, has returned home. However, she is met not with joy, but with anxiety, as a living symbol of the collapse of empires. Life had dragged her through the underworld. The former queen of Thrace and Macedonia, wife of the great Lysimachus, she had witnessed the destruction of her world firsthand. Having lost her husband in battle, the woman made a fatal error by trusting her half-brother, Ptolemy Ceraunus. The price proved unbearable. Ceraunus cold-bloodedly slaughtered 2 of her sons right in her embrace, while the mother desperately tried to shield them with her own body. She is about 37. The crown, husband, children, all remain in the past. It would seem that the unfortunate woman has nothing left but to seek seclusion and weep out her grief. But Arsinoe II did not arrive in Egypt to live out her days. A predator, backed into a corner, has entered Alexandria. Her gaze falls upon the wealthiest power of the Oikoumene, led by her soft, science-obsessed brother. There, too, she sees a rival, Arsinoe I, the daughter of Lysimachus. She perceives this woman as a temporary figure, occupying her throne by some misunderstanding. In the silence of marble halls, a hidden war ignites. Arsinoe II disdains poison or the dagger. She leaves such methods to amateurs. Her weapon is fear. She virtuously entraps the king's lawful wife in a web of paranoia. Soon, Arsinoe I, who had borne heirs, finds herself in a total vacuum. Rumors crawl through the streets. The queen is plotting a coup and an assassination attempt on her husband. Evidence, almost certainly fabricated by the experienced hand of this Macedonian Medea, lands on Ptolemy's table. The king, who hates open conflict and is extremely suspicious, makes his move. The verdict sounds merciless. The queen, accused of treason, is not merely divorced, she is erased from reality. Arsinoe I is sent to Koptos, into the burning sands of Upper Egypt, away from the capital's luxury. Centuries later, archaeologists will discover a stele there, where she still styles herself king's wife, unable to accept the collapse. But in Alexandria, her memory is wiped clean. The throne is empty, and it is occupied by the one who directed this fall. Why did Ptolemy II decide on this? For the sake of a refugee sister, he exiled the mother of his children. The answer lies in the ruler's character. A brilliant administrator and diplomat, Ptolemy II did not possess the steely, ruthless will of the first wave of Diadochi, and he acutely felt this deficiency. Arsinoe II acted as a kind of Alexander in female form. Tough, ambitious, hardened in the blood of betrayals, she possessed an instinct of political predator. Ptolemy needed such support. Their union became not just a marriage of convenience, but a fusion of two facets of power. The brother provided resources and legitimacy, the sister, iron resolve. She filled the void in his soul. The palace held its breath. The old queen is exiled. The sister has transformed into the chief advisor. But Arsinoe II does not plan to remain a shadow behind the throne. She needs the crown. To achieve this goal, she and Ptolemy prepare to make a step that will make the Greeks shudder and the Egyptian priests fall prostrate. They decided to step over the most ancient taboo. Around 273 BC, Alexandria explodes with news that sounds to the Greek world like a thunderclap from a clear sky. Ptolemy II announces a marriage, but not to a foreign princess. He takes as his wife Arsinoe II, his own full-blooded sister. For Macedonians and Greeks, such a union is not just an oddity, but an agos, a religious pollution and taboo. Incest is considered the lot of barbarians or gods, but certainly not humans. Poisonous rumors crawl through the city. At the vanguard of the criticism stands the poet Sotades, a master of biting satire. He composes verses that fly across the entire Mediterranean. One line oozes venom. You thrust your sword into an unholy scabbard. Such an outburst publicly humiliated the king. Sotades believes that in enlightened Alexandria, freedom of speech will protect him. This was a fatal mistake. Sotades failed to account that the rules of the game had changed. The king reacts instantly and mercilessly. Refusing a formal trial or exile, Ptolemy orders Admiral Patroclus to arrest the poet. The satirist, who dared to mock the monarch's love, is sealed alive in a lead box and thrown into the open sea. This splash of water marked the end of free speech and the beginning of divine will. Ptolemy II demonstrated clearly, criticism of his family is now not political opposition, but blasphemy. The lead weight at the bottom of the Mediterranean laid the foundation for a new ideology. The ruler proclaimed, "I do not obey your laws, I create them." Fear forced the laughter to fall silent. And then the couple made their main move. What was the logic behind this madness? Ptolemy took the risk for the sake of a brilliant and cynical political rebranding. Instead of excuses, the union was declared Theoi Adelphoi, the Sibling Gods. Firstly, For the Egyptians, this was a return to the norm. The gods Isis and Osiris were brother and sister. Ptolemy transformed for them into an understandable, true pharaoh. Secondly, for the Greeks, they played the Olympus card. We are like Zeus and Hera. What is forbidden to oxen is permitted to Jupiter. But the main reason lay in the hermetic nature of power. By marrying his sister, Ptolemy II cut off external claimants. The risk of a father-in-law king demanding lands or brothers of the wife craving generalships vanished. Power closed into an impenetrable circle. Arsinoe became not just a spouse, but a fully empowered co-ruler. Her profile was minted on coins, she led foreign policy, while Ptolemy handled internal reforms. They turned into a double-headed eagle, controlling all spheres of life. The dynasty gained in vulnerability. Arsinoe II received divine status while still alive, becoming the most powerful woman of her era. But to hold this greatness, mere brute force and lead boxes were insufficient. Ptolemy needed something more than fear. He required admiration. While Arsinoe handled grand politics, the king decided to buy what cannot be conquered by the sword, all the knowledge of the world. While other monarchs depleted their treasuries for gold, Ptolemy II implemented in the Alexandrian harbor perhaps the most curious whimsical customs regulation in history, the ship fund. Any vessel dropping anchor immediately met a search party. However, the pharaoh's agents were not hunting for spices or blades. Their target was books. Upon finding a scroll on board that was absent from the library's catalogs, the guards seized it without further discussion. Scribes hastily copied the text onto cheap papyrus to return to the owner, while the priceless original was sent to the royal funds under the label "From the Ships." Such state piracy served not for profit, but for total power over information. Ptolemy II intended to accumulate the entire heritage of humanity in Alexandria. He realized possession of the original is tantamount to owning the truth. The heart of this intellectual vortex became the Mouseion, the famous Temple of the Muses. Before us is not just a museum, but the first scientific research institute in world history, a closed campus adjoining the king's chambers. Ptolemy II attracted the greatest minds of the era here. Here Euclid systematized geometry in his Elements. Aristarchus first hypothesized that the earth revolves around the sun, and the poet Callimachus compiled the world's first library catalog. The monarch appointed them fabulous salaries, exempted them from taxes, and provided full board. But such grace had its price. The poet Timon of Phlius acidly nicknamed the Mouseion the birdcage of the Muses, implying that scholars were fattened here like exotic birds, doomed to eternal squabbling. Nevertheless, it was these walls that saw the birth of a project that changed the course of history. Desiring to gather the wisdom of all nations, the pharaoh initiated the translation of Jewish sacred texts into Greek. According to tradition, 72 translators worked for 72 days to create the Septuagint, the Greek Old Testament. Thus, a pagan king who had deified himself paradoxically acted as the sponsor of the Bible. Why did he donate budgets comparable to army maintenance to science? The answer lies in survival strategy. First, the technological gap. The thinkers of the Mouseion did not limit themselves to verses. They designed perfect siege engines, invented hydraulic systems, and drew the most precise maps. Deep knowledge of mechanics gifted the fleet an advantage unattainable for the linear generals of Seleucus. Second, cultural capital. By appropriating the Greek literary heritage, Ptolemy II turned Alexandria into the only legitimate heir of Athens. Education now required a trip to Egypt. The king successfully monopolized the soft power of the ancient world. Ptolemy II demonstrated clearly, intellect is a formidable weapon. However, even the luminaries of science faltered before one acute problem. In the East, in the Seleucid Empire, the might of the army relied on 500 war elephants, the tanks of antiquity. Egypt, however, did not possess such a resource, and the route to India was securely blocked by the enemy. The pharaoh's army remained vulnerable. Ptolemy required his own heavy machines, and then he cast his gaze toward lands that others feared, into the impenetrable thickets of Africa. Ptolemy II possessed everything: gold, a fleet, the best intelligence network. However, one critical vulnerability deprived his generals of sleep. The main enemy, the Seleucid Empire, held a monopoly on the superweapon of antiquity, Indian war elephants. Previously, we saw how Seleucus traded vast lands for 500 giants. These living tanks crushed the phalanx formation with their mere appearance. The Egyptian army proved defenseless against such might. The Indian route remained closed by the Seleucids, which stripped Ptolemy of access to the living tanks of antiquity. The king realized an open battle on land would turn into a catastrophe. The strategic deadlock required an asymmetrical solution. Studying reports of travelers in the silence of the library, Ptolemy cast his gaze where other Greeks feared to look, to the south, into the wild forests of Ethiopia and Eritrea. Rumors held that the beasts there were capable of challenging the Indian colossi. Soon, the largest and most expensive special operation in the history of Hellenism began. A chain of hunting bases rose on the coast of the Red Sea, Ptolemais Theron and Berenice. Hundreds of people departed for these lands, adventurers, engineers, and experienced hunters. Capturing an elephant is only the beginning of the difficulties. They had to transport 4-ton enraged beasts over thousands of kilometers. Ptolemy's engineers achieved a technical breakthrough by constructing elephantagoi, specialized elephant-carrying ships. These floating fortresses with reinforced decks and high sides withstood the power of the animals. It is hard to imagine the chaos on board when frightened giants panicked in the middle of the open sea. In inscriptions from Adulis, Ptolemy proudly declares his dynasty's primacy in hunting these beasts for war. He built a military-industrial complex from scratch, from capture in the jungle to the training camps of Memphis. There, African forest elephants were acclimated to the noise of battle and the wearing of towers with archers. The irony of this arms race is obvious. The actual military success proved dubious. African forest elephants were inferior to Indian ones in strength and stature. Later, at the Battle of Raphia, they scattered in terror before the larger brethren of the Seleucids. But the economic effect exceeded all expectations. By creating infrastructure for war, ports, roads through the desert, anti-piracy patrols, the king unwittingly opened the richest trade route. Through safe corridors, the goods of Arabia and India poured into Egypt: frankincense, myrrh, spices. The Red Sea effectively turned into an internal lake of the Ptolemies. The ruler sought tanks, but obtained a monopoly on luxury. Taxes from this traffic filled Alexandria's treasury, turning Ptolemy into the wealthiest man of the era. He proved, sometimes logistics decide the outcome of history more convincingly than any battle. Now Alexandria possessed everything: an army, a fleet, elephants, and limitless resources. Ptolemy showed sufficient wisdom not to expose himself to attack personally. Why risk dying when you can buy someone else's death? While Antigonus Gonatas restored order in Macedonia, the Egyptian king threw open his purse. He reasoned soundly: in the best war, Spartans and Athenians die for you. The era of great proxy conflicts had arrived. By 267 BC, Ptolemy II feels himself at the summit of the world. The treasury is bursting with gold, war elephants strike terror into barbarians, and the library gathers the wisdom of ages. However, in Macedonia rules Antigonus Gonatas, a man hardened in the fire of the Gallic invasion, gripping the throat of Greece with an iron hold. Ptolemy intends to eliminate the competitor, but sending Egyptian soldiers to their doom among the cliffs of the Peloponnese is not his style. Why risk life if one can buy another's death? The king tries on the role of banker of freedom. He literally floods Athens and Sparta with gold, fanning the flames of rebellion against Macedonian power. In Athens, the politician Chremonides, bribed by Egyptian silver, declares a war of independence. Egypt guarantees fleets, provisions, and protection. Blinded by the glitter of Alexandrian talents, the Greeks willingly believe the promises. The city-states await a savior, not realizing, for Ptolemy, this is not a sacred struggle, it's a cold calculation. He waits for enemies and allies to exhaust one another, watching the slaughter through the glass walls of Alexandria. But the concept of proxy war cracks. Antigonus Gonatas proves to be too tough a nut to crack. He takes Athens in a tight ring of starvation. Meanwhile, the Egyptian admiral Patroclus merely patrols the coastline, fearing to land troops against the invincible Macedonian phalanx. Soon, catastrophe strikes. Irritated by the blockade, Antigonus leads his squadron into the open sea. Around 261 BC, near the island of Kos, the impossible happens. The Macedonian fleet shatters the renowned armada of Egypt into pieces. Ptolemy loses control over the waterways. The notorious wooden wall is breached. The thalassocracy, erected by his father, develops a deep fracture. Celebrating triumph, Antigonus Gonatas dedicates his ship as a gift to Apollo, openly mocking Egyptian wealth. Athens waves the white flag. Sparta is defeated. Ptolemy's resources burned away without a trace. In this moment, the ruler comprehends a bitter truth. Gold buys mercenaries, but not victory over those fighting for survival. The defeat at Kos and territorial losses in Asia Minor back the king into a corner. The path of war is closed. However, Ptolemy II is famous for his ability to adapt. When the blade breaks, poison comes into play. In 253 BC, he signs a peace with the Seleucids, but this treaty is a trap. The king marries off his daughter, Berenice, to Antiochus II. Her dowry is so colossal that the girl is nicknamed Pharonophoros, the dowry bringer. But this is not an act of goodwill. It is a Trojan horse. This was political sabotage. The main condition of the marriage is that Antiochus must exile his lawful wife Laodice and strip her children of their rights. Ptolemy embeds his blood into the enemy's genealogical tree, calculating to seat his grandson on a foreign throne. And at the same time, this was economic strangulation. Berenice's enormous funds make Antiochus a financial hostage of Egypt. The Egyptian lord yielded at sea, but plans a triumph in peacetime, destroying the rival's ruling dynasty from within. He does not yet know that this genius scheme will turn into a bloody tragedy that his heirs will have to clean up. Ptolemy II is aging. Agonizing gout drives him into the embrace of endless feasts and philosophical disputes. Behind him lies the richest polis of the world, the greatest library, and virtuoso diplomacy. However, at the sunset of his days, the king remains alone. His wife's sister, Arsinoe, is dead. His children have turned into pawns on a chessboard. Looking at the flow of the Nile, he feels time slipping away.
But before departing, Ptolemy II will show the world his final, most grandiose show.
At the twilight of his reign, Ptolemy II demonstrates to the world the true might of Egypt. He organizes the legendary Grand Procession in honor of Dionysus. This is not merely a parade, it is a triumph of infinite blinding wealth. Along the streets of Alexandria, platforms slowly float carrying golden statues, the height of which, according to eyewitness accounts, reached 25 meters. Following them, exotic beasts from all corners of the oikoumene are led. Elephants in precious harnesses, giraffes and lions. The cobblestones are literally flooded with rivers of wine. The grandiose show became a political manifesto known as the ideology of Triphy. It proclaimed, the right to spend without counting is the only sign of divine power. Ptolemy broadcast a clear signal to the world. Your armies demand wages, but I have so many means that I can splash them onto the road. He built the image of a paradise state with inexhaustible resources. However, behind palace walls, in the silence of personal chambers, the living god felt deeply unhappy. The departure of Arsinoe II left a painful vacuum in his life. The king deified his spouse and erected magnificent temples in her honor, but this did not return the person close to him. Ptolemy vainly tried to fill the void with new favorites. When Belistich wins the chariot race at Olympia, he showers her with honors and builds sanctuaries for her as an earthly incarnation of Aphrodite. But the body betrays the monarch. The master of Egypt is tormented by agonizing gout. Possessing the best medicine of that time, Ptolemy is powerless to buy himself health. Ancient historians have preserved a piercing scene. Leaning on servants, the king gazes from a window at the bank of the Nile. There, on the scorching sand, simple workmen are resting. These people eat meager food, laugh and sleep under the burning sun. And then the richest man on the planet remarked with bitterness, "Oh, if only I could become one of them." In 246 BC, Ptolemy II departs from life. To his heir, he passes an empire at the zenith of glory. Borders from Nubia to Thrace, a treasury bursting with treasure, and a dominant fleet. But along with greatness, the son receives a curse. Having built a golden cage, the king predetermined the fate of his descendants. Growing up in an atmosphere of transcendent luxury, they will forget the taste of iron. The heirs will understand too late that the belief in the ability to buy peace is merely an illusion. And when the era of Rome arrives, the gold of Egypt will prove useless against legions. Ptolemy II Philadelphus entered history as the peaceful king and creator of the Golden Age. He proved intellect transforms into a most powerful weapon. But the paradox lies elsewhere. All his life, this soft, educated ruler submitted to forces that proved harder than steel. It is accepted to believe that he ruled Egypt single-handedly. However, such a conviction is merely a skillful illusion of antique propaganda. The fate of Ptolemy confirms, even an outstanding mind sometimes serves only as a cover for another's will. True dominion belongs not to the one who occupies the throne. Real power is concentrated in the hands of those who make key decisions in his shadow. We looked at events through the eyes of the brother. However, there existed another side of the coin. Beside the pharaoh, and often instead of him, ruled a woman whose name Greeks pronounced in a whisper, Arsinoe II, own sister and lawful spouse, a refugee who attained the status of a living goddess, a personality who commanded armies and fleets while Ptolemy studied scrolls. She who was called
king in female form. In the next episode, we will completely shift perspective. Awaiting us is the biography of Arsinoe II, the woman who forced her brother to marry her, eliminated rivals, and created a matrix of power that became the template for Cleopatra 2 centuries later. This is the view of a predator from inside the golden cage. Subscribe so you don't miss the Shadow of the Pharaoh series. Like if you appreciated Ptolemy's intellectual style. Share in the comments who, in your view, was the actual ruler of Egypt, the brother or the sister. Thank you for your attention. See you soon.